So you can't do all those special effects on your face, Jess. So we're gonna have to just see the real Justin, not the puppy face that I know you were gonna try to do.
Is that a thing? No, I don't want to and like ruin our lives. Cool. All right. Well, we've got
Oh, we got some
it took
people
us.
checking us out.
Yeah. Hey, what's going on, y'all? Juan's here. We've met him at Kamikaze. I don't remember him, Justin. He's awesome coffee guy. And then we got. Oh, looks like Marissa's in there too. Cool. Are you at work, Justin?
Yes.
I mean. All right, so why don't you go ahead and kick us off, dude?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you for joining us for California Inc. virtual panel. We'll be taking a behind-the-scenes look at the creation of this project with specific emphasis on DIY self-publishing, crowdfunding, the convention circuit, and other things we've learned so far. As you probably gathered, I'm joined by illustrator Dave Law, writer Art Ebuen, and I'm the editor of the project, Justin Giampaoli. Thank you for being here, you guys.
For sure, man.
Yeah.
Fun idea.
For those that don't know, the Kickstarter for California Inc. issue number 3 is currently running with about a week left. I think we're about $46 away from funding. So if someone wants to come in and make a contribution, you can put us over the top. There are digital and physical options, not only for issue 3, but the first 2 issues as well, along with a whole host of amazing variant covers, bundles, lots of other cool merch, and that's at californiainccomic.com. Once again, californiainccomic.com. So guys, I'm gonna quickly read our creator bios from the Kickstarter page so we don't have to waste too much time with introduction, and then we will dive right in. I've got a few questions for each of you, and we'll take live questions as well, I think. So Art Ebuen started as an animator for Futurama and The Simpsons. Over the last 2 decades, he's moved on to tell other brands' stories as an associate creative director in advertising and as a writer-producer for film and video production. Dave Law is the artist and co-creator of the ongoing sci-fi space opera, The Space Auditorium, the mind-bending Thoughtscape 2319 anthology comic, and cyberpunk horror Wolfpunks. He's contributed to anthologies such as Wrong Magnetic Poles and the eclectic Paranoid American History 101. He focuses on visually exploring the unknown and dreaming alternate, often dystopian worlds with his illustration, sequential art, and concept design. His style is bold and adventurous with a good dose of humor and lightheartedness. Once again, I'm Justin Giampaoli. I was a prolific critic at 13 Minutes and Comics Bulletin for over a decade. As a writer, my work includes the self-published crime caper, The Mercy Killing. That was with artist Tim Goodyear. Introductions and bonus content for New York Times bestseller DMZ at DC's Vertigo imprint. The alt history epic Rome West and sci-fi drama Star Trek Down. Both of those were with artist Andrea Moody at Dark Horse Comics. So, guys, I tend to be somewhat process-oriented when I think about things. Before we
a little bit
dive into the nuts and bolts of the project and the campaign, you know, I was thinking that you really have to want to do this in the first place and decide on DIY, right? So, Art, let's start with you. Where does this kind of DIY creative streak come from in you? Not just in comics, but in general. Where do you get that entrepreneurial spirit from?
That's something that's just, I like to say I'm a self-made person, you know, like everything I've gotten in my life, I've kind of worked for myself. I wanted something, I'll go work to get it. Just like my career in animation, it wasn't given to me. I moved to LA with the least amount of experience that someone should have in illustration to go learn animation. After about 3 years of studying, I got in. I was working for The Simpsons and Futurama. After about total of 6 years of doing that, including going to school, I discovered that I kind of wanted to go study more other art and specifically advertising. And I went back to school to go do that for about 2.5 years, and I've been working in advertising for about 18 years now, as you mentioned earlier. So kind of, it's always been my thing. Like I'm a true believer in if you want something, you got to work for it, but you can go get it, but you got to go do it. And so same with books here. You know, you and I, Justin, we worked on this. And initially we were supposed to go publisher route. You know, we are supposed to go pitch. And then I found out that we can go indie and do it ourselves and own it all ourselves and control it all ourselves. And it took a little bit of learning. It's still doing a lot of learning, but it's one of those things where I was like, well, I know how I learn. Let me go learn how to do this. And have been going at it for what? How long have we been doing this for now? A year and a half, 2 years now. So yeah, it's been fun. It's definitely a job in itself for sure.
Yeah, I want to kind of explore that a little more. I mean, why Kickstarter as a crowdfunding platform? Why self-publish versus pitching to a traditional comic publisher?
Well, as you know, you could pitch and then you got to wait a few months, maybe not hear a thing. And then a lot of times you might not hear anything for a few months. And then do you wait? There's no set timeline or anything for any of that stuff in terms of, well, do I move on to the next one? Well, what if someone does call me from over there and I pitch over there? And then if you do get the green light, what's the timeline from when you get greenlit to then going to print? It could be a couple of years. So with the power of the internet, there's a lot of people self-publishing, self-promoting. Why not take control and build your own brand the way you want to, instead of kind of basically having another boss? So that was kind of it. That just the full control kind of thing, really. Don't get me wrong, we're not getting the amount of eyes on it immediately that if you'd had a big publisher, but I figured we could build that ourselves. It'll take a little bit longer, but again, we have control over that as well. So that was kind of the fun of it for me.
Good. Yeah, let me ask you one more question, and then I got a couple for you too as well, Dave. But Art, talk us through, you know, how did you assemble your creative team? What advice would you have for people wanting to kind of follow in your footsteps and do the self-published route? How do you find an artist, an editor, a letterer? How do you put the team?
Well, Justin and I met through a comic book shop, and actually we started as friends first. So find yourself a friend that happens to edit. No, no. It's anytime I've changed industries in the world of art, or just any job, it's about putting yourself in there, getting to know folks, getting to know who you get along with, and that's the fun part of assembling any kind of group of people you work with. Outside of here, I'm a producer for video, and depending on the need for the job, you find the folks that you trust who fit that specific type of work, and the only way to do that's by meeting folks. And so before meeting Dave and before even thinking of pitching this, I spent a few years meeting a bunch of people in the industry to pick their brains. You know, like how do you meet people? You know, just kind of ask them questions without freaking them out too. You know, without being weird, but just networking, getting to know folks, and then you figure out who you do like to work with. And Dave, you could talk about this later. Before we even talked about the book, you and I working on it, we just talked and hung out for a bit. So I'll let Dave get into that later on. But I would say get to know the industry, get to know the folks, figure out who your folks are, who your people are, and who you can get along with, because you're going to be working with them. And just like any school project in high school, you know, there's always that one kid who didn't show up, and then they slap your name on the paper. We don't want that guy on our team. And so you have the choice to, you know, find your people to work with, and it's best to just network and figure that out. But you can't do that unless you put yourself out there and go shake hands and kiss babies, minus the babies.
Right. So, Dave, Art mentioned, you know, how the two of you met. You guys met at LA Comic Con a few years ago. As an artist, what do you look for when writers or other potential collaborators approach you about a collaboration? How do you vet those projects that you're going to take on?
That's a good question. Yeah, you know, usually I like to look and make sure we're kind of aligned on kind of our goals and our expectations of a project. There's definitely a lot of people who are just kind of tossing around the idea and thinking about making a comic book, and they don't either have it fully fleshed out, or they don't even have, like a script made or something like that. And in which case, like I'm not going to say no, necessarily no, but I won't agree to anything, and just kind of see how it goes from there. But yeah, definitely you get approached by people who have things more figured out and have things more planned out, or have things that is a story that sounds exciting for you to draw, and the area that they're hoping to market it, or the audience that they're hoping to speak to is in alignment with mine. Then yeah, it's an easy decision there.
So on the kind of, not the creative side of the equation, but the business side of the equation, what advice would you have for artists when it comes to negotiating compensation, right? One of the things I've learned in this industry is there really isn't a standard for anything, right? Everyone breaks in a different way. They have different experiences. So are you looking for, an upfront page rate, a percentage of royalties on the back end? Are you looking for some type of shared ownership? Like, what advice would you give a budding artist about negotiating that?
I think like usually I get a lot of, amongst artists and stuff, we often talk about like, hey, how much do you charge for something like this? Or what would you say about it? Would you want to do a project like this? Or, and the nice thing actually about being a commercial artist like me is like, it's really flexible. Whether or not this works as a career for someone really is a series of kinds of equations, and whether or not they equal out. Like, how much do you need to make? And so that's how much you're going to charge if it's going to take this amount of time. So I think it's really different for everyone, and art can be nice in that it can kind of cater itself like that. Like if you really don't have a lot of financial burden, then you can work for pretty cheap and do the projects that you want to do. But if that's not an option for you, you need to ask an amount that is going to make sense for you. Otherwise, you just won't be able to do your best work. It'll ultimately not work out. You might get the deal, but you're going to miss the deadline, or you're going to deliver subpar work, or it's just not going to go well. And really, this career depends on being able to do good work, get it out there, and continue to do that. And those are the ways that you grow. So it's important to make sure that you're putting your foundation, rooting yourself in something that's just going to work for you. So yeah, you can ask around just so you kind of get a range of what someone maybe in your level would do, but it ultimately falls into how much do you need to do this? How much time is it going to take for you to do this? How much does that equate to it dollar-wise? And you have to be truthful. And if it sounds high, that's the way it is. And you maybe have to improve the quality of what you're offering to demand that price, or maybe it's just you got to figure out a different business model for yourself. But it's a challenge, but it's also a fun part about being a commercial artist.
Art.
Yeah, I'm a true believer. I mean, as a visual artist first, I tell people all the time, especially right out of college, as soon as someone asks you for something, it's okay to ask to get paid. I know people like to say like, well, let me do it for free, or they ask you to do it for free. It's okay to ask for something. Any kind of payment, you're worth something. As soon as someone asks you for something, you're worth something. So get yourself something, whether if it's a logo for a band, get a couple of free tickets to their next 2 shows. It's probably not much to them, but it's an experience for you. Get yourself paid. You're worth something at all times. Even if it's a t-shirt or something, like it's something like you are giving them something they're going to benefit from. Get yours. I'm not trying to say be a jerk, but
I think
you're owed something.
And it goes for the other way too. If you're looking for an artist and you don't compensate them at all, they're not going to necessarily treat your project as seriously as they would if there was a dollar amount attached to it. That's a livable wage for some people. It's a different proposition then.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up a good point. It's something that was instilled in me when I started out in this industry, which was like place value in your own work. If you don't place value in it, chances are the other person won't either. And developing that kind of personal threshold for what you feel appropriate compensation is. There's nothing wrong with that, and it can differ for everyone. Art. So before launching the Kickstarter, you spent quite a bit of time kind of immersing yourself in the world of self-published comics and that community and building a network. Talk to us a little bit about how and why you did that.
That was probably one of the best pieces of advice that I got through kind of visiting a few different self-publishing panels. Panels, they're great, by the way. When you're at cons, go to the panels. Don't just watch exhibit 4. It's you could learn a lot. And one of my one of the things I learned was think about like Kickstarter is a community of folks, of creatives, and from all over the place. And you pop in just like, hey, give me some money. They're like, who are you? You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's a click, but also like, you know, what's nice is you go around and you meet all these other Kickstarter indie folks, and you back their book, you read it, you go talk to them about it. One, you're making connection with them. You're learning about their book, you're learning about their process, and then they're learning about you. And then, you know, you kind of put in there, hey, by the way, I'll be kickstarting in a few weeks or in a couple months. They will they might back you, they might not. But one thing they could do that's free to them is they'll signal boost, and that helps a lot. But also because you are cool, they'll be cool. I mean, just it's the community in Kickstarter and crowdfunding in general. We tend to look out for each other. One of the things I've heard that I liked the phrase is, we just want to see each other win. These are all passion projects. As we know in comics, it's not much money in it. It's because we just want to share stories. We can't afford to all make a short film. You know what I mean? And you can get a longer story out of a comic for much smaller budget than a film. And it's fun to collect books. So you know, these folks, they just want to share their stories. And we just want to see each other's projects win, and if we could signal boost each other. And the only way to do that is if you connect, like I mentioned earlier, just the more people you connect with authentically, you know, none of this smarmy like, hey, you know, it's authentic.
You do that well now, all right?
Carnival Barker, come here. You know, it's, you know, and you connect with creators that you feel like align with your stories and your way of thinking. Justin and I, we connect a lot with similar TV shows. We both hate watch the same shows and complain about the same shows, but we also don't align sometimes on some movies. But you know, that's a part of friendship, right? And being in America, we can have different opinions. So, but find those folks and connect with them, and they can all help. And you got to do that, and it takes a little bit of time. And I've seen some people just pop out of nowhere who have backed nobody, and this is their first project, and their story, like you said, Dave, is half baked. It has no promise of like when the book's going to be done, and it's like, why would I invest or put money into something that is really unsure and kind of wishy-washy? It's like you're an unknown quantity. I was unknown, but then other people are talking about me. But if it's someone who's out there that's new and it's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get that book. You know, it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
So that kind of segues into another question I had for you, Art, and then I've got a couple more for you, Dave. But Art, what have you done 3 successful campaigns now, by what we can tell?
Yeah.
What would you, if you had to distill it down, what are the elements of running a successful crowdfunding campaign?
Oh man, it's like production. I'll say there's a pre, there's during, and there's the post. So prep like hell beforehand, and that's part of what I talked about earlier. Getting to meet people, getting into people's ears, getting them to know that you have a book coming out, so that hopefully they'll signal boost you. But then even before that, doing your own self promotion outside of word of mouth, doing your own self promotion, prepping people for it, getting that pre-launch number up is really important. But before the step before that, to get a pre-launch is to get a pre-launch page. To get your pre-launch page, you got to have most of your Kickstarter page built in. It's basically a website, you know what I mean? And if you've never put together a website, it's a lot of work. There's content, there's writing, which is content, images, videos, your different tiers of rewards. So there's a lot of prep, and if you have great prep, it can only help the production, the actual campaign. During the campaign, you can't just go, okay, it's launched. You got to stay in people's ears. in different formats. Like here, you have different formats. We have different interviews that Dave and I have done. Justin, you've done some with us. You get into different publications, hopefully. There's different ways to reach people who have not heard from you yet. So you got to do all the PR and advertising during. Then the most important thing is after. Well, not say just as important. Fulfill the heck out of it. Make sure they get what they're asking for. We've all been stung, and I'm still in the middle of one campaign where it was due to us about 4 months after we backed it. It's been about 2.5 years, and it's like, I know the project looks dope, but I'm just like rolling my eyes because I don't know if it's ever going to be fulfilled, and it might be. And if it does, it's going to look great. But it's like the next campaign that person puts up, I don't know if I'm going to back it because I can't trust that. And we've delivered usually within 3 months of campaigns end into people's hands by then, unless you're overseas. So, give as a customer, make sure you get everything you want. You're giving as much as you want in terms of experience.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. So Dave, I'm curious, kind of similar question for you. I mean, you've been involved in other Kickstarter campaigns as well. So kind of two-part question. How does California Inc. compare to those experiences? And just in the aggregate, like, lessons have you learned overall in terms of crowdfunding and self-promoting that way?
I think Art covered it really well. I think one of the things that I would say is important is having frequent, meaningful contact throughout the campaign, having images that you can kind of throw out, interviews you're doing, just some buzz to keep people kind of excited about what's coming. And I think that sometimes is not what you don't think about that going into the campaign. You're working on either getting the book done or getting, planning for the book or planning the stuff that you're going to use for the main campaign element of it. But having things that you can show in Instagram and on your websites and X and Facebook, all the social media, you have to kind of touch on all of them these days. And so it's a variety of media that you have to kind of think about and produce, and that can be tricky because I'm really my focus is producing static comic book sequential art, but in order for these things to kind of ultimately happen, you have to kind of understand all the other different types of media, which is fun for me, but not necessarily always what everyone wants to do. And so, but I think the key is to have fun with that, and I think the audience recognizes when you're enjoying yourself and when you're doing things that you're excited about, which I've been lucky to always be working on projects I'm excited about. So that's always been very easy for me to do, and get motivated for it.
Speaking of that, projects you are passionate about and that you're into as an artist, what would you say, like, what elements of California Inc. were kind of in your wheelhouse, and what was maybe a stretch for you? And, how have you guys started to collaborate differently? I've certainly seen, like, the relationships evolved from issue 1 to issue 3, right? So talk us.
Lots more hate.
Yeah.
No, not at all. It's not anything to love. It's just expanded, like. No, it's good. Let me think. Well, we've tried different things with the process. So we've actually kind of used a different process for each book.
We have,
Yeah. The ultimate finished thing is still the same, but how we kind of approached it. Even though the script was fully fleshed out for books 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is the story arc, that was already there. But it's just far as how I approached each book and how I communicated that with Art. That changed over time, and I think that was just a matter of us kind of feeling out how we each prefer to work. And I've always been flexible, so I'm willing to try different ways of working, and that's how I've learned kind of the best way for me is kind of keeping an open mind and trying different things. So I think Art's been good about that too. We've done a couple different ways, and I think the last book we worked really smoothly. I think that was probably the ideal way, and we kind of I think it does rely a lot more on trust though, I was doing I think a bigger part of each page prior to having Art check it, and that kind of helped me keep my flow a little bit more but it still allowed Art to kind of take a look at it, make sure I was on the right path and doing things the way he wanted. But I think we had the right checks and balances so that there wasn't ever, I don't think there was ever a time where he came back to me with something that I was like, oh man, that's a crazy change that I don't want to do. I mean, it's always totally, yeah, within the process. So I liked it.
Do you find those periodic check-ins, they help keep you accountable, or are they annoying, or how does that feel?
That's a good measuring, because I think you go too far into one area or the other, they can feel that way. It's when they're just right that it's helping the collaboration, that you're getting feedback that you need to make the page in a way that we're both going to be even more excited about, which is the main idea of a collaboration. And I don't think with art it's ever fallen too far into any of those territories. But I've definitely worked with people before where I was like, that's too much guidance, or that's not enough, or so. But it's art, so it's all good. There's really never a time where anyone gets like too frustrated. But I think as far as just in the spirit of the best collaborative environment, it's kind of a meeting place.
Good.
If I don't mind, if you mind me tagging onto that, I think what helped with myself and Dave is we're both pretty good communicators, and especially by the third one, Dave was like, hey, every this date, expect this many pages. So it became like a thing where instead of me checking in, he gave me a heads up, like around this time, you'll get this many pages by this time. And so it started to become like the email I was waiting for, and not like waiting in a bad way, but I was like excited to get, or even that text. Sometimes you'd email or text and I don't know which one it'd be. And so he would email or text on either a Friday night or like a Saturday and say, hey, pages are up. I'm like, ah! And so like you have an expectation so that your expectations are managed ahead of time. So that kind of communication between the two of us, I think, helped a lot, because I set a date for when I wanted it to end, and I'd say, well, does that work for you? And he'll push and pull there a little bit in the beginning, and then I'll say, okay, by that date, that means we should average this many pages per blank. And then he'll say, okay, let's do that. So I'll send you this many pages by this date, and then the next few pages. And then so we were clear to manage each other's expectations. So that helped a lot between the two of us, for sure.
Cool. So Art, before you mentioned, on the back end of the campaign, obviously fulfilling the orders and the backers is a huge component. But one step in the process before that I wanted to touch on, because I don't hear this getting discussed a lot, is you have to find a printer. So talk about sourcing a printer, and what advice do you have for folks that are looking to vet a potential printer for their project?
Ooh, you're talking to somebody who works in print too, as a print production manager for a newspaper of all places a while back. Get samples. Get samples for one. Reach out to whatever prospective printers, get samples. And then if they're a good print house, they'll send you paper samples, but they'll actually send you comic samples with a label on there to show you what stock and what treatment were done to each one of those specific comics. There's that. And then the next part of that is going online and seeing what people have, what they say about them review-wise. And then if you have a network, like you should have by now, if you're about to kickstart, reach out to those folks and say, hey, I'm looking at this printer, I'm looking at this printer, I'm looking at this printer. What do you think? And actually, Dave, you're the one who pointed me towards a couple of them, and I landed here because of quality, price. There's a trade-off, right? Yeah. There's fast, cheap, and good? They're definitely cheap and yeah. So I got the two I got is cheap and good. They're fast on their end, but the delivery is much slower. So that's why I build in that 3 to 4 month timeline. Because as soon as before the campaign ends, I'm going to send the files off. So hopefully backers get it way faster than issue one, because we got issue one pretty quick. So yeah, it's a matter of, just like when you're researching anything, I would check the reviews and then talk to people whose books you do like, and say, hey, who'd you use? Who's your rep? That's another thing, is finding a rep that you like too. So after you find people you like, whose books you like, ask who they used. Ask for their rep, because then they'll treat you right well. I mean, right as well.
So one more prepared question anyway I have for you to round things out. I wanted to talk to you about distribution of the once you get it printed. And I want to talk specific about engaging with retailers and comic shops. I've got some questions for Dave about the convention scene, but Art, for you, for retailer engagement, kind of two-part question. One, how do you go about arranging store signings? And two, how do you figure out how they are going to carry your book for you? Is it, you know, they're buying it outright at a discount? Are you doing commissions? How do you engage with retailers?
Um, One, I just reached out to the shops that I actually visit, which is cool. And then actually I had one reach out to me because they've kind of heard of the other shops reaching out. And just to keep it clean and easy for myself, I sold the books at, you know, maybe a few cents over, maybe a buck over what I paid for them. And I tell them what I'm paying for, what I'm selling for, so that we're matching. You know, I don't consider them competition once they have it. It's just more places for people to find our book who might not have found us because they're not on Instagram, they're not on Twitter, they're not on, you know, Threads. So, and they love supporting local. So find your comic book shop that has a local creator section, which both of ours do here. Justin, you and I visit. That's a great sign for one. And just let them know, hey, look, I got a book coming out. That's one way to get them to get the book. And then a lot of times they'll say, come on and do a signing. You know, that's another good one. A lot of stores are asking or looking for signings in general. Just it brings in foot traffic. They like supporting local talent. It, you know, it feels good for the local economy just to kind of promote your own people around you. And it's an event. It's an event to promote for themselves. So just highly recommend reaching out. It doesn't hurt at all to try. The worst is you are exactly where you were before. You don't have that signing. And what's worse than that? Nothing. I mean, you were there already. At least you know for sure. But unless you try, you won't find out. What was the other part of that question?
Let's see. We talked about signings and them carrying the book. They purchase it outright versus commission?
Yeah, I have them purchase it outright. And then again, I tell them what price I'm selling it for so they could match as well. And there's no undercutting each other. And being honest with them, how much I paid for them as well. Just letting them know how much I paid for. I'm transparent about that stuff as well. I'd rather have the book out in different ways to distribute than, you know, keeping it for myself just to make an extra buck, but then you have less eyes picking them up.
Yeah. So Dave, the three of us were at WonderCon in Anaheim, and over dinner, I think we touched on this idea of provocative imagery. There's a variant cover you did for number 3 that's got kind of some manipulation of the American flag on it. My question is, you know, do you ever avoid work because you feel like it's too provocative, or is that something you lean into? Do you have a kind of a bigger appetite for that risk or that controversy?
Oh, I definitely have an appetite for it. I've always loved that. And actually, to touch on an earlier question you had said, asked Art about the do-it-yourself kind of mentality. You know, for me, I got that when I was younger. I was really into the punk rock scene. I really love like punk rock music and the culture around it. And punk rock has this big do-it-yourself kind of, you know, say things that are uncomfortable, do things yourself. Don't rely on the man to like tell you what you can and can't say. So I've always just had that kind of spirit in me. I loved that about the punk scene, and I think indie comics in particular have always really embraced that. It's just really in the spirit of punk rock, in that you can say what you want to say, you can create what you want to create, and you can get it out to the people all by yourself. You know, it's like me, Art, and you know, we're really just doing this whole thing together, and I think that's a really awesome thing. You know, no one's telling us what we can and can't say, and so a cover like the one
Justin
that we did. But you know, the cover we did is a cover that, you know, I think causes people to think, and that's what the book is all about. You know, and it's I think it's using that kind of imagery in the best way, and probably one of the covers that I found we kind of created almost collaboratively as well. I like the most, but
Cool.
you know. So I don't know. Definitely don't shy away from anything that would be strange or maybe questionable. If anything, I think that's what comic books are meant for. and I do my part.
Nice, love it. So of the
Just I was gonna say, don't forget, I got questions for you too, and we got like 18 minutes. I want to make sure we get to you as well.
I got one more for Dave, and then we can split here. Sure. Of the three of us, Dave, you definitely have the most experience tabling at conventions. And, you know, Art and I have a mutual friend, Ryan Clater of Elephant Eater Comics, and he's always given me these tips about cons, like, you know, you want to elevate your merchandise on the table, and he likes to stand to kind of be at eye level with potential customers. So what other tips have you learned on the con circuit? Like what sells, what doesn't sell? How do you figure out what you're going to sell? What are the tips for the con circuit?
That's a great question, because I have thought about it a lot, and I've seen a lot of different styles of selling in the comic convention scene. And, you know, like, everything goes from being way too passive to people sitting, you know, where they just sit and draw and look down at their notebook all day and don't even look up. And some people, their artwork is just so spectacular that they can do that, and that works. They're okay with that, and that works for them. And then some people are like, I call them the mall kiosk people, because they like remind me of the people in the mall kiosks where you're walking by and they're like, hey, try this perfume, or hey, you want to, you know, like, and they just like will not leave you alone. And it saddens me to say that method totally works too. I've seen people just sell out of stacks of what looks to be a pretty boring book, but purely based on their salesmanship, which is, you know, impressive as well. So I think what I'm getting to is you kind of have to find who you are, and you do have to be, you have to put your salesman hat on, which is uncomfortable for some people, but it is really, you have to think about that if you want to get your work out there, especially if you're one of those artists that doesn't have just spectacular artwork that you can just sit and look down. And most of us aren't that. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. And the people who are walking down these aisles, I've seen just so much amazing artwork. And if you're doing your own original stuff, you're even at a bigger disadvantage, because they're there, and they, you know, Marvel has done all this marketing for Wolverine. So people who have Wolverine pinups, they're gonna get the eyes. If you've got these characters they've never thought of, they usually don't want anything else, because their time is so divided. So you have to figure out a way to engage them, I think, but you also have to do it in a way that's true to you, is going to be something that you can do and not hate yourself for after the end of the day. But will also help you move your work forward and get it in front of people, because people do sometimes need a little gentle nudge to look at your stuff and realize, oh, they do like that, and they would like to buy that. So,
and I think that, you know, being yourself, that authenticity resonates with people. You guys are both great at being authentically you and engaging with people in an authentic way, and I think, you know, that wins people over. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely you got to be yourself.
All right, I'm gonna let you guys turn the table here a little bit and see if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, can I start, Dave? I got
a
go
good
for
one.
I think so. As a producer, what do producers do? You know, that's the question I get whenever I'm on set for work. What's a producer do? That's the question I get about editors from indie folks. You know, I know the benefit of it, but I want to hear you say it out loud so that people understand, you know, why we have you as part of our team, and how important that is for you. Can you, you know, tell us what the critical roles are for an editor, and you know, the story process, and just kind of throughout the whole thing?
Yeah, no, that's great. I definitely got that question multiple times at LA Comic-Con when we were tabling there.
That's right.
Thought. I really think I break it down into 3 phases, right? The first phase is really you as the writer, Art, talking about story structure and talking about plotting and the script beats we want to hit, and just making sure that wireframe for the story works, and that there's a through line for the plot and the character arcs. Honestly, it's my least favorite part of the process. But
That was my. I have a question about that too. I'm glad you brought that up.
part, right? It's the most important part. You could have the coolest art and you can have the coolest dialogue, but if your story structure doesn't work, it's going to fall flat. And so that part's important. Second phase, which is my favorite part, is really just dialogue polish. Like, I love going through and balancing a couple different factors. I want to make sure that you are channeling the characters' voices, that they are distinct, and that as an editor, I'm helping you, the writer, channel your voice. Like, I'm not going to rewrite everything in my writer's voice. I want to channel Art's voice and make sure his voice is coming through. And just really stripping the script down to the bare minimum amount of words. I saw this posted on Instagram recently. It's a good reminder. It's the writer Kurt Vonnegut. He's got these 8 rules for writing, and number 4 is my favorite. And it's this idea that every single line of dialogue has to either reveal character or advance the plot. And if it doesn't do either of those 2 things, you really have to question why it's there. Last phase is just typo patrol, right? Like, making sure everything's spelled correctly, it's grammatical, but also like making sure the words flow. I say the dialogue out loud to myself. It sounds good to my ear. Looking at the way the words lay on the page. There was a really interesting example of this actually in issue 3. There was a single line of dialogue that Frank just inadvertently forgot to letter in. You made a note to him to add that line of dialogue back in. And as I'm looking at the page, Dave's art is amazing. It's so emotive. This character's got this sinister smile. And I'm like, I think this actually works better without the line of dialogue. Magical things happen when you lay the page like that. So you get happy accidents sometimes. That's where I really feel like I can be an objective third party and add some bang for the buck and make those little decisions like that let's let the art carry the story here and strip the words out.
That's a great point. With graphic designers and anybody actually who does anything with words is, whenever you lay something out, you always got to hit print, because when you look at it separately, like from a screen or even just holding it on a page where it should live, even if it's a billboard, you cut it small and you hold it up, like something about it becomes a whole different animal. Kind of like when drawing, when you flip it backwards to look at it, like in a mirror or something, just just a different point of view. It's funny how things can change, and you think you got it right when you look at it again, like, oh, it's different in a different medium. Let me adjust that. So yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that line being removed, it does give her that much more gravity of like, sure. Like, I remember that scene. Yeah, for sure.
No, yeah, I think that's a great point you made about the whole showing and not telling, or whether the words are important. It's probably one of the things that is the most glaring for me when I look at a comic book, is when you have narration that's describing what the image is showing, right. and then there's dialogue in it too. You're like, this just, it's unnecessary. And I think one of the things that I like about California Ink that also challenged me a lot is that Art has a lot of the story written in the descriptions of the page. And so I have this big obligation to make sure that these things are being shown, which I guess leads to these kind of cool, happy accidents where dialogue is missing and it's not necessary. But it's definitely cool to see how it came from, an initial writing that Art would make, just in you realizing it could be like this with less wording, and then ultimately coming to being the image that we finally have created there. I think that leads into a question I have for you, if I can do that one now. What are some of the things that new people who are making comic books, what are some of the kind of editing mistakes that they will typically make that one should look out for?
Sure. Well, I think you hit the biggest one just now, which is my pet peeve. And critic, there was an old Punisher comic I used to always cite as an example, and it was like the art showed the Punisher walking into a room, and then the dialogue box said Frank Castle enters the room. So I'm just, I seize on exposition in the dialogue. I can't stand it. And that's the number one thing. Writers can be, I'm a writer, I can be a little pretentious. I want my word in. I cram all my clever wordplay in there, but don't need it. And you really have to realize that when you pair words with images, this magical third thing happens. And you can back off the dialogue and really let the art shine. And like I said, when you've got art like yours, Dave, that's so emotive and everyone comments on the facial expressions you're able to capture, like that really carries a lot of the storytelling weight, and that's a gift, and you don't want to step on that.
Thank you.
Yes. See 90s Marvel comic books where I've seen a page where I'm like, I can't even see the art anymore. There's exposition, narrative, and there's word bubbles. I'm like, is there a character in there? I can't.
I'll like stop reading a book when I see a page is like way too much reading, and I'm like, I don't know if I can get through all of this. Then I'm like, yeah, what's going on over here, you know?
Yeah.
That dense feeling is not good. I don't think the pages don't flow well with that dense amount of dialogue.
Another question for you, Justin. What are the pros and cons for being an editor for both a big publisher versus being an indie publisher? Like, what are the comparisons in terms of like pros and cons for either one for you?
Yeah, I feel like the purpose of the editor changes the larger the company gets. I think with a smaller project like California Inc. or a DIY project, a self-published project, I feel like I'm more a part of the creative team, that you and I can riff on dialogue choices, or we can talk about, Dave's cover and the flag imagery, and it's more collaborative. I think the few times I've been able to edit books, like at Image Comics, for example, as a freelancer, you get more involved in project management, and I found myself in the schedule more and making sure the art was done and the colors were done on time, and it was available images for the Diamond catalog, and just being more of a project manager than a creator. And there's certainly a time and place for that. That's important, and that's what full-time editors do a lot, is just keep the trains running on time. But for me, I really prefer the more creative side of it, where not to steal any of your thunder, Art, but it's almost like being a co-writer instead of just an editor. And I find that's just much more fun. It's much more fulfilling. It's much more creative.
I mean, I no thunder stolen. I mean, it was fun for me to work with you on it. Just like anybody else I work with, I like bouncing the idea instead of just making it mine. It's always more fun when someone else puts their 2 cents, because they see the character a different way that I meant to write, but didn't see it in my head. And like Big Sis's voice, you definitely nailed it down more towards issue 2. I mean, issue 3. I'm like, oh yeah, so she does have a little bit of that. Okay, yeah. You pushed it, so definitely appreciated that. Dropping stuff over here.
I have a question for you, Justin.
Yeah.
Anyone who follows your Instagram knows that you read a ton of comics. It seems like you're showing something new every other day. What are some titles right now that you think are just doing things exceptionally well, like that? As far as just a well-rounded book doing the kinds of things that you think comics should be like.
Sure.
Sorry, quick warning. We might actually cut out exactly at 2 because Instagram only gives people an hour.
Question real quick, and then I'll give us a little outro. Off the top of my head, 2 of the comics I've really liked recently, The Sacrificers, which is Rick Remender's new book at Image Comics. The artist is Max Fiumara. Absolutely gorgeous, dark, brooding, fantasy elements. Really fantastically done, well executed. First trade just came out. Highly recommend that. And then there's a new publisher, Distillery, that recently put out kind of that big magazine size format comic. There's a title called Somna, which is by Becky Cloonan and Tula Lote, and they're artists that I will buy sight unseen. Their name alone, I buy the book. It's always going to be beautiful. They have a really unique approach to kind of witchcraft, and I think it's in the 1600s. It's a really gorgeous book in that oversized format.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, as you guys mentioned, coming up on the end of our hour together. So I just wanted to thank you, Art, and thank you, Dave. Thank you to the audience for joining us for this behind the scenes look at California Inc. and this whole world of self-publishing and crowdfunding and marketing. Before we sign off, I just wanted to once again redirect everyone to the Kickstarter page, which is currently live for California Inc. #3. That's at californiainccomic.com. Once again, californiainccomic.com. Thanks, everybody. We will sign off from here. Thank you, guys.